Welcome. You're watching The Big Question with me, Tamanna Inamdar. How many minutes can you go without checking your phone? Be honest. Okay, how many minutes can you go without checking your social media? Whether it's messaging, a site to post photos, check comments, we know it's the biggest addiction in our lives, and one that is completely unregulated for children. Some believe it's as addictive as alcohol or cigarettes or drugs. So would you let a minor use any of these? Should we be regulating the dopamine hit that constant scrolling gives a human being for brains that are still forming? This is perhaps the thought behind the newly released Draft Digital Data Protection Rules 2025. Now, while the new recommendations cover a variety of areas, one stands out. According to the new rules, social media platforms will have to take parental consent before enabling the account of children below 18 years of age. In fact, the move is not just for social media platforms, but also gaming platforms and e-commerce websites who are referred to as data fiduciaries in the rules. That's not all. The parent's identity will have to be verified to ensure that it's in compliance with Indian law. And there are ways that they have listed out. If the parent is already registered with a social media platform, the platform will verify details basis the information already shared with the parent. In case the parent is not registered, then the platform will have to obtain the parent's details from government portals or DigiLockers. Now, this recommendation by the Indian government comes just a month after the Australian government pretty much banned social media for children under 16 years. According to a report released by the US Surgeon General in 2024, adolescents who spend more than 3 hours per day on social media face twice the risk of symptoms of depression and anxiety. There are also issues pertaining to body image, especially among adolescent girls. With mounting evidence of mental health risks, the debate over regulating children's access to social media has never been more urgent. Which is why the big question we're asking today, is it time to clamp down on children's access to social media? To speak on this, I'm joined today by Aarti C. Rajaratnam, psychologist and author, Dr. Lakshmi Vijay Kumar, founder Sneha and consultant at the WHO, Karnika A. Seth, cyber law expert and founder of Seth Associate Advocate of Supreme Court of India as well, and Harpreet Suri, leading lifestyle and parenting influencer. I'm going to start off the conversation with Harpreet. And Harpreet, you are a social media influencer, you are a parent. What do you think about this entire debate? Do you think social media should be clamped for kids?
Yes, absolutely, because I've heard, seen, had personal experiences with people around that it is really affecting kids a lot. They're not realizing the difference between real life and real life. Because I do this as a living, I have, because I do this. So I've told my children very clearly that this is real, this is not real. They are not allowed to be on social media. My daughter, absolutely not, because she's just 8. My son is 13. I'm surprised. I'm lucky. I think my son hasn't taken on to social media being a teenager. But my daughter's growing up, and it is really worrying me. Like you were mentioning, these girls get body shamed. They have their idea of perfect body, perfect look. I don't want her to get swayed, and I need some intervention. If government does it, amazing. Otherwise, I'll have to cut clips. I will not let my children.
No, but I'm just wondering, Harpreet, because you are in this space yourself, and how difficult is it to tell your kids not to be on social media? Do you get the question then? You are in social media yourself. Why are you telling us to curb down? And do you think a parent's overview is required?
I'm 42. I know what is real and what is real. A teenager doesn't know. They don't understand. They have no understanding that, my daughter, whenever she sees some experiment at YouTube, she has no understanding of real and real. She wants to try everything. So I've been realizing over time that there need to be a mandate, where they need to know how much, what are the limits, how much can they do. Trust me, I do this for a living. There needs to be a curb.
Okay, so there needs to be a curb, is what Harpreet is saying, and she's agreeing with this concept. But what are the concerns that we really see? Let me come to Dr. Lakshmi Vijay Kumar on this. And, this is important. The flip side of this could be that children who have no exposure to social media are going to go into a world dominated by the presence of social media. It's part of their learning, it's part of their education. Frankly, it's also now an educational tool in a lot of schools. How do you keep that balance, and what are the concerns?
There are major concerns. For example, okay, you said it's a part of a learning tool, but actually, if you look at the research, how much of learning really happens, then you'll find it's only a small percentage. A huge percentage of the time spent is on social media. Social media, I think the Swedish Prime Minister very nicely put it, it's big tech against small brains, which is what is happening, because we know that when children are spending more than 2-3 hours on social media, there are structural changes in the brain. Forget about the functioning, we all know. But there are structural changes. The gray matter is reduced. The amygdala is compromised. So the result is their memory is disturbed. Their, as you rightly said in the beginning, the reward system which you get, the dopamine hit is causing addiction, and their cognition is also disturbed. So they are not able to remember things as well. In fact, there have been many studies where they have looked at children who have been exposed to net for more than 3 hours and less than 2 hours and less than 2 hours. There is a significant association that with every 1 hour increase in looking at the screen and social media, there is not only brain changes, there is emotional changes also. There are depression, there is anxiety, and many children are also suicidal. 1/3 of the children are cyberbullied, and 1/3 of them are suicidal. If you think that there are about 100 million children, adolescents using the social media, imagine 1/3 of them being bullied and 1/3 of them being suicidal. So it's not surprising that suicidal ideas and behaviors have increased in young people in the last 5 years, definitely. So it has an impact on the structure of the brain, in the functioning of the brain, and also in social functioning.
But I just want to take that point forward. Big tech against little brains or little children, and it really seems like an unfair fight. But then my question is, let me come to Karnika over here on this, that the draft guidelines don't say much of anything. I mean, these are going to be fairly easy to flout, will they? Because you need to get parental consent to, build an account. A lot of kids are already doing that. Even the official social media rules are more restrictive than the access kids actually have. What do you make of that?
Well, when it comes to child protection on the internet, there is building cyber awareness and empowerment around even in terms of schools or educational institutions, and the regulators, the policymakers, when they look at this area. We are all deeply concerned with it, and that's the reason why data protection and child protection was very, very important area, and the DPDP law as well, and the new rules which have come about, the draft rules. Now, when it comes to implementation, there is definitely a challenge. There is to be a verifiable consent from a parent. So, for example, if a child wants to open a social media account, the parent of the child has to give a consent in writing, that is, an express consent. And if that is not done, then the child cannot open a social media account. While the provision per se is good. However, the implementation is a challenge, because what happens if a child does not disclose his true age? What happens in that scenario? How do we protect the children's vulnerability on the web in such a scenario? So these are certain implementation challenges. But from that, you can't penalize a child. What if a child gives wrong information about his age and flouts the law? Then what happens in that scenario? So these are some challenges which we are facing in terms of policy in India, and we're looking at how we can navigate this space. In general, when it comes to the web and interface with the web, it is important to have this as a tool, because you do research, there is education, training through these platforms and internet. However, there has to be a regulation. While we can put in place filters and monitor the screen time, for instance, and put in other softwares to ensure they don't have access to adult content, for example, or anything which is harmful to minors. This social media account opening itself is a great challenge, because right now we can't ask the child to give his ID. And it's really a child doesn't have a competence to contract validly, in terms of law. He cannot contract. The capacity to contract is not there. So these are certain implementation challenges we're trying to look at and find a way of how we can ensure safety of children in the social media space as well, be it gaming or in fact any other
No,
e-commerce platform.
so the laws are there in place. Implementation,
Yeah.
of course, is an issue. The fact is that the world is facing this challenge about the impact that big tech has on young minds, as our speakers have said. Let me come to Aarti Rajaratnam on what exactly is the concern. And I started by saying that it can be addictive, it can give a dopamine hit. Is there data out there which is telling us how addictive it can be? Because that's the portion which is concerning. I started by saying that all of us are facing some kind of a dependence on social media or looking at our phones constantly. For children, are they even more vulnerable?
Very much so. And Dr. Lakshmi had already talked about structural changes in the brain. But let me, because I work with childhood and adolescents, let me give you age-wise what the real challenge is. When an infant is, born, and for the first year or so, the infant's real necessity is what is called attuned caregiving, which means every sound or every need that they have needs to be understood by a caregiver and has to be responded to. When attunement is missing, it immediately starts stunting certain aspects of emotional and social learning for the child going forward. Now, a simple example I can give you is, now every time the child cries, an infant cries, a screen is actually being used to distract the child, where it could have actually been, sort of substituted, or rather actually properly met, attuned in an attuned way by bonding, or by a parent who was crying, like singing to them and things like that. Now that is missing. Secondly, what's happening is, in fact, there was a Romanian study where they called this virtual autism, because children who did not have attuned caregiving did develop features of autism, like situations where, over a period of time, the gap between their normal or what was expected and what they were exhibiting were very, very huge. The gaps were very huge. Going a little further, the age of fantasy, between 3 and 7 years, children need fantasy play. They need to do the doctor, the teacher, those kind of games. All that is being replaced by some animated content that is telling them that a tree should look like this, or, animal has to look like this, a mango has to look like this. So we're actually stunting various aspects of their learning. Now, coming to social media per se, because our discussion is with regard to social media, let me tell you that, there are a lot of false personas or avatars that children are using. In my book, I've talked about it and called it mental toxins. See, the difference between a toxin and a poison. A poison kills you immediately and you know that you've ingested it or it's available in your environment. But a toxin, on the other hand, many times you do not know that you're actually assimilating it. It's there in the environment, but you do not have access to it, or you don't know this is lead poisoning, for example. Similarly, with social media and the internet per se, children are being exposed to it more and more, but we do not know how it is affecting their personality. Now, for example, I can give you a lot of case studies where children who are into gaming platforms have very reduced ability for guilt, for the ability. Yes, because look at it. You're reinforcing somebody kicking somebody off a bike, somebody shooting somebody coming in and blowing up an entire building, and then you're expecting that child to be peaceful. You've already destroyed what is normal play. When you were playing with, your kitchen sets and all of those things, you didn't poison the food. You actually added less salt or less sugar and things like that. But when you look at a gaming platform, it is being developed. See, the difference between, and Tamanna, I want to give this context because parents will be watching this. See, the different, play is oxygen for the nervous system, right? Play is something that is directed by the child. The child's nervous system decides what to play with. So, for example, if they're moving furniture, that is pre-writing. They're learning how to use an object in space, right? Once they start writing within lines, that play will stop. When they're learning phonetics or how to do spelling, that object that they're moving, they'll also add some sounds to it, like a vehicle. There is so much rich exposure that rather rich exposure that a child requires in everyday in the everyday world, which social media and screens have stunted. Right? Having said this, when it comes to personality, it's not just body shaming. These are not the only messages children are getting. Children are also getting to understand that I can cheat people, that I can create false personas and bully other people. Dr. Lakshmi beautifully mentioned that 1.3% of children are actually victims of cyberbullying. Why is cyberbullying becoming easy? It's because you don't have to do it face to face. I was a teenager at a time where there was no screen available. So if somebody needed to bully me, they had to have the courage to come and do it face to face. Right? That takes a lot. But now children can just create millions of false avatars.
So you're absolutely right, Aarti. You're absolutely right, and these are big problems. Now, my question is that then what is the solution? Is the solution to come and tell a 17-and-a-half-year-old that you can't be on Facebook or you can't be on Instagram or Discord or whatever else that they're on? Because it seems like, to some a little extreme. Where is the cutoff? Is 16 the cutoff? Should 18 be the cutoff? Should there be parental consent? Should there be a complete ban? The problems are well known, documented, but then what is the solution?
See, it's not age. There are three things that we have to look at. What am I using social media for? Am I using it because I'm not able to make friends in real life, because I'm feeling isolated, anxious, etc., and therefore I'm using this as some kind of a substitute for real human interaction? And secondly, first is, why am I using it? Secondly, how much time am I using it? And what else am I cutting off because of that? Am I cutting off physical activity, etc., etc.? And the third and the most important aspect of it is, how much of guidance have I received from a responsible adult? Be it a parent, be it a teacher, be it anybody else. How much of guidance and support have I received from an adult? And legislation is not going to change anything. We can bring as many laws as we want, but for every law that is brought, there will be loopholes, right? And our police department, I'm sorry to say it, will not take it seriously. So having said all this, I would say that it'll have to start at the relational level. Unless we as parents start building back healthy relationships and model healthy behaviors, no amount of legislation is going to change anything.
So I understand that, but the fact is that law has to also step in. I want Harpreet to come in on some of the points that have been discussed over here. Harpreet, do you agree that this is so dangerous? Because then I'm wondering, if it's so dangerous for children, it's dangerous for everyone, isn't it?
Yes, I would want to say it's not just children. I know so many women who are undergoing depression just because they are watching this, what I say, real life, on Instagram and trying to ape that life. Or, a lot of, everybody is not like a real influencer. People are now, I think, going on social media to just showcase their real life, where they want to showcase that, I travel so much, my life is so fancy. And everybody else who's watching it is getting so depressed, thinking that their life is not like New Year's just went. People are just showcasing how much they have traveled. I was seeing all of that. I was wondering, the whole world is traveling. What is happening to this world? What trauma they all are going through and putting their families to. The kids are also putting their families to showcase to their friends and where they are going. What world have we got into? It's very sad. I'm really concerned. Trust me, I'm looking at women around me and I'm concerned. Talking about children, I'm concerned about women.
No, my point is, now, how do you deal with the children who are going to resist this? If it comes through, first of all, it's a draft. I don't know how implementable it'll be. It's going to be resisted, and it has ways to go. In terms of this actually becoming a rule, or this actually coming into being, Karnika, I just wanted to get your view.
Tamanna, right now it's open for public consultation, and I think the policymakers are really looking at what are the flip sides of the same and what are the other perspectives. To give you an example, there used to be a lot of crime on the web when it comes to fake profiles and opening these accounts. Sometimes the children would do it for fun themselves. Minors would be creating a fake account just to engage in cyberbullying or just to be mischievous. but there are times when there are criminal rackets into child pornography and grooming who are trying to contact the child, generate interest in the child, and gain his trust or her trust, and then blackmail them by asking them for selfies and photographs. And it's a huge trafficking rackets are operating like this. So if you look at that scenario where such criminals open fake accounts showing themselves as minors and cheating by personation, in those scenarios they will not be able to circumvent the law. If this law as it is gets passed, then they will need to have a verifiable consent if they project themselves as minors. So there's at least that aspect which is a positive sign. However, we need, when it comes to self regulation, the responsibility is on parents and also minors themselves for their well-being and safety emerge from this draft. So we are trying to, we'll have to create a balance and how we can mitigate any kind of or reduce to the bare minimum any kind of safety concerns for children in such a scenario where verifiable consent is circumvented by the child by not showing himself as the right age. That is the main challenge.
That is a big challenge. Aarti, I just have one quick question, for you. For people whose kids have already had a fair bit of exposure to social media, weaning them off is going to be close to impossible. How do you deal with that? Because if you suddenly come and say one day, okay, no more social media from tomorrow, it's going to be hell in every household. Let's be honest.
Now, the first thing for any addiction to be changed, a relationship has to be built, right? Addictions can be changed only when there is a trusting relationship the child can fall back on. Most parents, especially parents of teenagers, do not have the patience to build that relationship. So I normally suggest what is called a connection ritual. See, a parent, when they need to build when they want to make a change, and like in your case, you're saying, how do we take out social media from their hands? I'll need to build what is called a connection ritual, which means every day, irrespective of what happens, I'm going to prioritize time with my teenager, with my little child, 15 minutes to 30 minutes, doing something both of us enjoy. And this is not the time I'm going to be lecturing, moralizing, belittling, judging, criticizing, nothing. It's time that both of us enjoy. We could be playing a game of badminton, going out for a walk, baking together, doing something that both of us enjoy. And this connection ritual has to be built for at least 45 days. And it will take time because the teenager or the child is going to resist this in every possible way. But it's extremely important to understand that unless I build a relationship to be able to change behavior, I will not be able to make it. The second thing that I need to do once the connection ritual is built, I need to let them know that I wish to speak to them about this particular thing. Because in India, we don't understand that communication, especially with a child, requires certain specific steps, and we need to be committed to it. So when I communicate to my child that tomorrow in 24 hours, let's talk about social media, and I want you to prepare your side of the discussion, I will come prepared with my side. And it's important to have this dialogue. The third, when you make that appointment, you need to keep it. Many parents just do it when they're having dinner, when they're going out for a drive. That's not how it's done. It has to be a discussion that's serious. Let the child talk first. If it's a boy, walk and do the talking. Because with boys, you make them sit down, they will not be able to process the information. With girls, sit beside them. Because when you use these rules, the communication is more effective. And finally, whatever you need to say it in 2 or 3 very simple points, which are actionable. Because if you do not do this, it's not going to work. And it's not like I spoke today, it'll change tomorrow.
Yeah, it's going to take time.
It has to be ongoing.
It's going to take time, definitely. It's going to take time. It's going to be the long haul. But I think this is a problem that's here to stay and needs a lot more intervention than just from the government. Also, the government intervention and its efficacy needs to be looked at more closely. But thank you to all of you for joining us on The Big Question today. If you have something in mind that you want us to talk about, that you want us to cover, please write into us. We want to hear from you. We'll see you back here tomorrow, same time, same place.